And we're recording. Hi, this is Catherine from South San Francisco Public Library. Today for Tech Tuesday, we'll be talking about misinformation online. And again, this recording will be available in 2 or 3 days. It will not include some of the questions and answers at the end. Please do use the Q&A and the chat as we go along. If you wish to chat with your fellow attendees, you will have to change the setting to, I believe it's all panelists and attendees, because by default it only sends to panelists, which in this case just means me. And with that said, let's move right along. So first off, I'd like to ask, where do you get your news? And I'm going to launch a poll to this, a poll to this effect. So you should see that popping up, and I'm going to give you about a minute or so to answer this poll, if you would like. You can put as many answers as you want if you get your news from multiple sources. If you don't feel inspired to participate in the poll, feel free to not do so as well. And in a moment, you will be able to see the results. Well, let's say in about 30 seconds. All right, it looks like most of the people who are now present have responded. So I'm going to assume for those of you who haven't responded, perhaps you didn't want to. And let's share these results. So you should be seeing it now, but it looks like the most popular source for news among attendees here is television news. But a lot of folks do use newspapers and or radio as well. And it seems like many people have at least 2 sources for their news, which is great. It's great to hear that not everyone is solely depending on social media or the internet, because that is a place where the news can be a little bit distorted sometimes. And it's great to see that several of you are getting it from multiple sources. That does probably mean that you're getting a more unbiased news just because it's coming from more than one place. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing those results and close that out and move along. So I think the type of misinformation that's gotten a lot of press recently, so to speak, is the intentionally misleading type. These clickbait, click here to see the shocking photos of celebrities, that type of thing. Which, I mean, just because it's clickbait doesn't necessarily mean it's untrue, but it is going to be framed in a way where they're trying to get you to have a strong emotional response and therefore to click on it. And sometimes that can mean distorting the truth or taking the truth out of context. There have also been a lot of photos and quotations and so forth that have been taken out of their original context, or old news sources, old news stories that get reshared, which may have had a completely different significance when it happened, say if it was 2 or 3 years ago, as opposed to if it happened now. Like if you see an article about someone attending a party and you assume it's within the last 9 months or so, that's a completely different thing than if they had attended a party in 2018, which it would have been fairly innocuous in most cases. And then, of course, misunderstandings can just get propagated through the internet, and you have the classic chain letters and so forth. So warning signs to look out for, particularly in the case of the intentionally distorted or intentionally untrue things, is if it seems too good or too bad to be true, and it's phrased in a way that they're trying to make you angry or happy or sad, or if the source seems a little bit sketchy. For example, there was a post that went around like Facebook and a few other social media sites that was a few months ago that was phrased as though, oh, my cousin who's a poll worker noticed this type of fraud. But the thing is, that exact text was copied and pasted by a bunch of different people. And so people seeing that might have assumed, oh, it's my friend who, so my friend's cousin saw fraud, but really it was your friend saw this post and decided to share it, but it looked as though they had written it themselves. That's a little bit suspicious, of course. You know, if so many people are sharing it, and clearly not everyone has a cousin who's a poll worker. So it seems like a lot of you are doing this already with getting your news from multiple sources, which is great. I suppose it's not surprising that people who would willingly attend a class on how to spot misinformation would already be doing some good practices. But yeah, if you can get your news from more than one place, it's less likely that you'll fall into traps with either biased reporting, or maybe if one source is not really doing their due diligence, even if they don't have a strong, say, political leaning. The other thing is when information is just breaking news, when it's just coming out the last few hours, it's much more common to run across misunderstandings about it, especially if some of this news is coming through social media. Things can get shared very, very quickly, and then it turns out, okay, there was, you know, someone didn't do their due diligence, and actually that's not quite what happened. So unless it's something where you need to-the-minute news, it's probably not worth like staying glued to your phone and having that to-the-minute news 24/7, but rather, you know, okay, what happened yesterday or what happened a few hours ago that they've had time to check. And one way you can easily find multiple write-ups on the same topic is by searching for the topic in a search engine and then checking the news tab, which is good because one, it limits it to more recent reports. You know, say if it's something that's ongoing, like the COVID-19 crisis, you know, some of the just general search results will be ones that are several months old. So it limits it to more recent reports, and it limits it to sources that are at least somewhat credible, generally speaking. So it's not just some random blogger, it's an actual news outlet, you know, even if it's not perhaps always your favorite news outlet. And just a note, you may have heard that some domain names or some endings to domain names, you know, the .org, .gov, that some of them are more reliable. This is not necessarily true nowadays. There are now websites that imitate official websites. You'll see this in phishing as well as a scam. You know, you get an email and it looks like it's from your bank, but actually it's from someone trying to pretend to be your bank. So taking a look at the web address of the site you're looking at, just to make sure it's what you would expect, especially if you're familiar with the organization. The one thing that is more reliable is that domain names that end in .gov are US federal or state government agencies. And the state ones have the state abbreviation in the URL as well. So it'll be something .ca.gov if it's a California state, you know, like dmv.ca.gov or something like that, right? If it's a California state agency. With that said, local governments often use .com or .net addresses instead, so you can't, you know, depend on that. For like South San Francisco is ssf.net. And then .edu is in theory limited to institutions of higher learning that are accredited with the US. In practice, there may be a few websites that kind of got grandfathered in because that requirement was not always in place. But for the most part, it will be accredited institutions of higher learning. Any other ending, pretty much, although there are some that are particular within some other countries that have a meaning there, but in terms of the US, any other ending to a domain name can be bought by anyone. Anyone can create a something.org, and it doesn't mean it's better just because it's a .org. I'm going to pause for a sec to see if there's any questions. I'll give you a few seconds to send any in via either chat or via the Q&A. And of course, if you think of questions later, even related to something that I covered right at the beginning, you can absolutely feel free to send those in whenever. And I will leave you an email address to send questions in at a later date if you think of one, say tomorrow. All right, given that I'm not seeing any chat notifications pop up or any Q&A, I'm going to move along. So one question that comes up is, how do you spot a suspicious photo? Or if you think a photo is suspicious or that may have been put into a different context, what would you check to make sure that it's the real photo? For example, there was a photo that went around a few months ago on certain social media sites with the claim that it had been taken as an aerial shot of a well-attended Trump rally. But in point of fact, and there was a specific city named, I don't recall which one. In point of fact, people who were familiar with the city in question were commenting that, no, it doesn't look like that city. That city is landlocked, but in the photo you can see there's a harbor and a river and so forth. So it really couldn't be that city. And it turned out that the photo had come from a music festival not held in 2020 in a completely different part of the world. So how do you spot that kind of thing? So here's a photo that was taken at a protest. And if you were to come across a claim that happened in a particular year in a particular city, let's say if it said that it was 2020 and it was in Paris, for example, how would you go about figuring out if it really was taken in Paris and if it really was taken in 2020? You know, perhaps the article says, oh, it's so shocking that they're not wearing masks, right? So if anyone wants to weigh in the chat or in the Q&A about anything they spot, I will give you about a minute to look at this photo. And if not, I do have some things I've pulled out of it so you can see it in a little more detail. Okay, sorry, it looks like the chat wasn't showing for me for some reason. Can.org.gov also be fake? Sorry, I will cover the questions that I missed along the way. .org can be fake. That's a freely purchasable site. .gov can only be purchased by or only be set up by a US government or state government agency, like NASA.gov, that sort of thing. For the person who said, are you sharing a slide deck? I am sharing my screen. If you can't see my screen, you may want to see that. You may want to sign out and back in. With that said, regarding URLs, if you have a URL that is clickable, sometimes they can disguise the link where it's clickable, and you need to put your mouse over it to see where it see what it actually is. Okay, good. So the person who's having trouble with seeing the slides is not having trouble any longer. But yeah, you can write whatever you want in the clickable URL, but once you click through, you would see what it actually is, or when you mouse over it, you'll see what it actually is. Well, that's on PC, of course. It's a little bit different on phones, but you can like hold down on the link and copy it. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, someone says, well, I don't know French, but we can Google to see if those are French. And someone else notices the flags, which is a great note. So I think I'll move on to the next slide, which has a bit closer shots of some parts of the photo. Oh, we have one more chat. One more chat. Something in the signs in the photo may have information as the city that they're in. That is absolutely correct as well. That was the first thing I thought of myself, actually. I was like, I wonder if this style of street signs is used in a particular part of the world only. But that's not what I ended up honing in on. What I ended up finding was this. So here, this truck was on the left of the photo, right there, center left. This truck is marked RDI and is the type of truck that news agencies send. Now, RDI is a news station that is located, it's actually changed names subsequently, but up until 2014, which gives you a possible hint to the year, although I don't know if they've redone their trucks. Up until 2014, that was the name of a French language news station that you could watch in Canada. So that gives you a hint. Maybe this isn't Paris, maybe it's Canada. And again, as someone mentioned, here's a flag. Now this flag, it does have the fleur-de-lis, which can be a little bit deceptive to folks that aren't familiar with this flag, but this flag is actually a flag of the province of Quebec, again in Canada. In the center here, we see a photo of someone holding a sign that says Quebec Solidaire, which is a political party that is only active in the province of Quebec once again. So there's a lot of hints in here. And some of you were right on the money with where to look for them. And then you also see this banner here in the photo at the top, which says Concordia, which is the name of a university in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. That said, there are multiple organizations called Concordia in the world, so it wouldn't be an absolute clue, but in the context that we're beginning to suspect this is Quebec, it's a little bit telling. The other thing in this photo on the right here that I would point out is that the name at the beginning of the sign is the name of a politician from Quebec, Jean Charest. And I know all this because I used to live in Quebec, full disclosure. So this kind of thing is easier if it happens to be a part of the world that you're familiar with. So I wouldn't expect necessarily for everyone to be able to pull out all of the things in every photo. But for instance, if we could see license plates, you could try to figure out what format the license plate number takes. And that would give you hints as to where in the US, if it is in the US. From a picture, how can we Google to see what those are, what those words mean? So you would have to copy it down unless you have, there is an app on your phone that you can get, the Google Translate app, which allows you to use your camera of your phone to auto detect the language. And then once you've auto detected the language, it will attempt to translate it. Now it's not 100% reliable in the same way that Google Translate is never 100% reliable, but it could be a tool that you might use. At a minimum, usually the language detection is pretty good and the meaning will usually be in the ballpark, at least for the word by word meaning, although the meaning of the sentence might come out a bit garbled, especially if it's kind of idiomatic. Anyway, so, but yeah, if you do spot some words, you can try Googling the words, and I will get into how to Google exact phrases later in this discussion. So to recap, what we saw in this photo, or what I saw, is because of the French language signage, the RDI truck, and the reference to the Quebec-based political party, it's probably in Quebec. And because of the Concordia sign, it's most likely in Montreal, which is the largest city in Quebec. And because there's a sign referencing Jean Charest, and I was able to Google and find out that he was only the premier, which is like the head of the legislative body. It's the equivalent of the prime minister on the provincial level. He was only the premier from April of 2003 to September of 2012. So it's most likely during that period. He has stayed in the news a little bit, but he's not as prominent as he used to be. So having him named on a protest sign is a little bit telling. So another thing you can do, if you're able to pin down the location, which I was because I recognized it, but if you're able to, by some chance, to pin down the location exactly, you can go and, or because perhaps, let's say the article did accurately say the location. If you have an article about, Joe Biden gave a speech at such and so location on such and so date, and you look at the picture, sometimes you can check on the street view at what time did that location look how it looked in the photo. So I'm going to copy this here link. This is a link, if I can. I'm going to click on it. And I'm going to have you look at the street view and see if we can spot this building when it was in this particular stage of partial construction with the top 6 floors, it looks like, not completed, as well as this banner hanging from a lamppost that advertises the play Wicked. So I click this, and now I will copy the link and I will put it in the chat in case anyone wishes to open it. Hello. There we go. In case anyone wishes to open this on their own device, it should open a Google Street View at a particular location. So this is the correct location. I imagine that the photo was taken here on the sort of sidewalk area. So you can actually use your scroll wheel if you have one on your mouse, or pinch gesture if you have a trackpad or a smartphone, and zoom in. But as you can tell, this building on the left that was in partial construction in the photo, as of the date that this street view was taken, was completed. Another thing that might not be as obvious, but let's see if we can pop it out, is this wall here along the underpass. Come on, zoom controls. This wall along the underpass did not look like that. In the photo, it has this sort of stepped edge to it. And in street view, it has this curved edge and these red markings on it. So clearly some work has been done on that between the date that the photo was taken and the date that this street view was taken. Now, one thing you may or may not have noticed is on the top left of the street view, there is this black box. And at the bottom, it has this icon that kind of looks like a clock next to the text that says street view. And if you click on that, it'll tell you at what date was the street view photo that they're currently using taken. And it'll show you a timeline where you can select other versions of the street view. So this is how you would compare. So let's do that real quick. So we can go earlier and it'll show the new one, and then you have to click to open it. And this one's a bit blurry, but it looks like the wall is like it was in the photo. But on the other hand, the building, it's this sort of gray building on the left here. This building was much more complete as of the date that this image was taken, which this one was taken in April of 2018. Now we suspect that this is earlier, just from the whole Charest thing and all that. So we can sort of zoom earlier as well. Let's go to April of 2014, just to save a little bit of time. This wall here, this on the underpass, is very similar to what it was in the photo. Although it looks like the railing might be different, I wouldn't swear to that. And then this building here has the incomplete upper level. So we're getting much, much warmer here. And then we can go back and we go to the next one available, which is the earliest one from this spot, is September of 2012, and it also looks like the photo. But we might want to explore a little bit earlier along. So what I'm going to do is see if one of the other views of the building has a better view of that location. So I'm just going to navigate along the streets. Pardon if it blurs a bit. So I'm just clicking on the streets. I'm not sure how visible this is, but when you hover your mouse over the street, if they have a street view from that perspective, they have this arrow. And so you click that, just sort of slowly advance. You can also use your keyboard if you have one to advance through the locations. And here we're much closer to the building, and as you can see, there's more views of the building. I'm going to try to go down the street a little bit in the hopes that we might see that sign advertising the play. But from this perspective, there's not very many shots. But there's also they also did a recording from the other side of the street. So we'll jump over there, the other direction. As you can see here, there's a bit more options. So I'm just going to keep going. And now we're in July of 2012. It sort of automatically jumps to the closest one. All right, nothing in chat as of yet. And the sign should be around here somewhere, the one for the play, if it's available in any of the shots. Let's just move down a little bit. Okay, let's move earlier. Okay, so right now we're in June. If we move to July, and the sign appears. So this is what I was looking for right here. The sign that says Wicked, which is the same one. It's from a different angle here. I wonder if we can get the correct angle. There it is, from the correct angle, more or less, although the placement of the pole appears a little different just because of the angle. But here we can see that we have the sign that says Wicked. And if we move a little bit earlier in time to the June photo, it's not there. If we move forward in time, the next one, unfortunately, is April of 2014. There's a bus in the way, but there does not appear to be a sign there. Of course, you wouldn't expect them to leave that sort of thing up for 2 years. Now it's in 2015. In any case, going back again, and there it is. So we're in the right ballpark, most likely the summer of 2012, but let's go back to our slideshow because I did pull some information on that. Or, well, let's hang on here a second and see, are there any questions? Let's see. Chats. Okay, nothing in the chat right now, but feel free to ask again later. We can come back to this. And let's see. So here's our slideshow again. And we found this sign and we found this building, more or less as they appeared in the photo. So we know that it was taken between June of 2012 and April of 2014, but I did some research on when was Wicked shown in 2012 in Montreal, because presumably they would have put up the signage shortly before it actually played. And it might be a bit small on your screen, but it looks like it played during August of 2012 in Montreal. So most likely that photo was taken during the summer of 2012. All right, so another thing you can do, and I think someone was asking about searching for, oh no, they were asking for searching for text, but one thing you can do is you can actually upload the image if you have it either on either the web address of the image, that would be the web address, or URL is this bar at the top of the screen, right? So if you have the web address of the image, or if you have the image itself, You can upload it to either Google Images, which I believe I have open, or to other websites such as TinEye, and it will search for the same image, or failing that, for images that contain similar elements. Now, the latter is not incredibly helpful in some cases. Let's choose File and Desktop. The latter, the searching for similar images, is not always extremely helpful because it's an algorithm that looks for it that is not always super accurate, but it is what it is. However, it did find the exact image right here as part of this sort of collage. And it says that it happened during the 2012 Quebec student protests. If you were to click through here to see what the source was, let's see, well, we have this very similar image, same location, different people. May very well have been a different date, but I believe one of the sources had the exact photo. Yeah, here it is. And it says here that it was the July 22nd protest. So we were in the right ballpark with that. The other thing you can do, well, actually, let me go back and just show you what some of the visually similar images were, just to illustrate. Now, it did come up with a bunch of mostly protest photos. So that's pretty good. But in some cases, I did one where I cropped it to the building, and it just gave me buildings that actually weren't that similar. They just had a similar balance of light and dark, more or less. So another thing you can do is you can look at the file properties, or metadata, which is to say the information about the file. So in general, digital files, including photos, will contain data on how and when the file was created. So for a photo, this will be when it was taken, what type of device took the photo, or sometimes modified the photo. Let's say if you put it through Photoshop. And sometimes where the photo was taken, if it was taken with a device that has GPS, such as a smartphone. Now, it is possible to remove some or all of this metadata, such as, for example, removing the GPS location so that people don't know where exactly your photos were taken without doing that kind of research like we were looking into. But oftentimes people don't bother to remove that. So let's show you what that looks like. This is what it looks like on Windows when you open up the properties menu of a file. And you'll want to go into the details tab. And it tells you right here in the middle what the date and time that the photo was taken, or in some cases modified. So in this case, it was taken apparently at 3:11 p.m. local time on July 22nd, 2012. Now, this is not 100% reliable, because if you have the time set incorrectly on your device, then it'll give you the wrong time in this page, such as, for example, I have a lot of photos that have the wrong year because I let my camera run out of battery and reset the year to an arbitrary one that was not correct. But in this case, it lines up with what we found before, so we can be pretty confident in saying, okay, it was taken on July 22nd of 2012. If not perhaps of the exact time. In some cases, if you scrolled down, it would have information about the camera as well. If you're doing this on a smartphone, I'm not sure how well it works on iPhone, but on Android in general, in your default gallery app, it will have the option to look at the properties of photos that you have. So if you go to yours right now, you might be able to find that it does have the GPS information, for example, or at least the time when it was taken. It's possible to just set up your phone so that it doesn't record that, though, as well, if you prefer to be more anonymous in that respect. Let me look at the chat because it wasn't telling me if there was any chats before. Nope, nothing. Excellent. Okay. So the next thing is a complete tangent, but someone did ask about finding text in a photo. Now it's going to be hard if it's you're trying to pull text from a photo of a language that you don't read, because identifying even the letters can be hard, especially if it's a script you don't read. But if you do have the ability to copy and paste the text, you can put the exact wording, pardon me for the typo in my slide. You put the exact wording in quotation marks to search for a phrase instead of individual words. And most search engines nowadays support this. Google certainly does, as does Bing. And this can be useful because oftentimes quotes on social media and on the internet more generally are credited to the wrong person. There's a few people who tend to get this a lot, generally someone who is well respected, such as Einstein, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, etc. They get all kinds of nice sounding quotes attributed to them, which they might even have possibly agreed with. But they didn't necessarily say it. So for example, you we're on Google here, go to all. I'm going to delete that text because it was given to me automatically. And let's say I couldn't remember if they said life is like a box of chocolates, if they said that in a particular movie. In this case, it worked pretty well without the quotation mark, but if you wanted to be sure that they would search for the exact quote, you would put the quotation marks. And you'll find a lot of articles. With that said, this is again a matter for that lateral reading when it comes to quotes, because sometimes you'll find a bunch of results, but they're mostly from like Pinterest or Twitter or something, or someone's being misquoted with that exact phrasing. So try to find a source that seems a bit more reliable than that. Do we have any questions up until this point? Okay, not so far, but I'll take them later in any case. If you take one thing away from this, I know I spent a lot of time on the photos, but honestly, if you take one thing away from this, it's the fact that there are already people who are doing this work. So you can use a variety of fact-checking websites. Oops. Just to see if someone has already gone through and seen what was up. So I'm just going to go through and put these in the chat. And it can be good to even check more than one of these. They don't all do a comprehensive view of everything. There we go. Factcheck.org is one of them. All right, come on, Zoom controls. There we go. Snopes.com. And so they will tend to find for you the most popular of the stories that have recently been coming out. And will, yes, thank you, Libby. Libby has put a different article on evaluating your sources. It's very helpful. Pardon me. And then another one is this Associated Press fact check. They're pretty good in general. So let's see. No. My chat window keeps disappearing. There we go. So that's the three that I had available. And so they'll have the timely checks, but they're also searchable to some degree, particularly Snopes, which is probably the one. Oops. Sorry about that, accidentally hit the stop share. But yeah, in particular Snopes, which I've used quite a bit, they have this search box so you can look for different things. And because sometimes the same, sometimes they covered it years ago because the same myth has been circulating through the internet. How do I search the fact-checking websites? Well, you're going to look for some. So on this one, it's got a search box at the top. Factcheck.org doesn't seem to have a search box right at the top, but they have a search button right here. So in the top bar here, there's a button that says search on it, and you click that. And then you can enter your terms like, I don't know, COVID-19, for example. It'll come up with all of that. And then here, they have it in the AP News one, they have this search button here. So you can just put your search terms in there. One thing I forgot to mention, but I intended to cover it about the websites, is that one reason I would recommend lateral reading over deep reading, which deep reading is where you look at the website and you try to see, oh, what's their what's their about us, what's their mission, who funds them. The thing is that some of the more shady websites, like the ones that are at least somewhat legitimate, will have genuine information in there, about their board or their investors or their mission, etc. But the ones that are really unreliable, the ones that are out and out spoofs of legitimate websites, and that sort of thing, those ones can just put whatever nonsense they want in there that is not necessarily true. With that said, if you have a news source that, say, doesn't seem to have a good standard of editing, so there's, some amount of typos will happen. We've seen that with my presentation today. But if they're really far below average in terms of their copy editing and things like that, that's a little bit suspicious. They're probably not a very big organization that has the ability to do good due diligence, really. Another thing you can do, because I know it's been a concern with, let's say, were certain federal government websites changed with the change in administration, or will they be changed when the new administration comes in? Well, there's a way to check that. And with that said, it is a fact that government websites change with changes of administration. That is somewhat business as usual. But if you want to see, their previous versions, you can go to the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine, which is not entirely comprehensive. It's not entirely comprehensive, but it's better than nothing. So for example, if I wanted to see what the city website looked like in the past, I can enter ssf.net, which is the web address, the URL of it. And it will give me this timeline that has different versions of the website from different years. And then once you click on a given year, it'll show you all of the snapshots that are available. In some cases, they won't have gone through the entire website, so you might not be able to click through to every subpage. It's common for images to be missing, etc. But again, you can at least see the text from when they had the snapshot. So this is going to be from February 1st, 2001 that we're looking at. And if any of you have been to the website in the last several years, you can see that this is already pretty different. This is a much more basic website. We can click through to different times as well. So it's much harder for people to get away with, changing a website and trying to pretend it's always been like that. You can see there's a bit of issues in the display. I doubt that it was intended to have this black line right through the middle, for example. But again, certainly better than nothing. All right, excellent. Now, so that was a really quick overview of the topic. There is a lot more to know, so I wouldn't be surprised if you have questions. Thank you for coming. You can stick around for the Q&A session where I will allow people to go on microphone and ask their questions. If you want to send questions you think of later, please send them to ssfpladm@plsinfo.org, which I will put in the chat after I stop the recording. And since you are a registered attendee, you will be getting an email in 2 or 3 days, assuming the recording comes out at all well, with the recording as well as the slides. Again, thank you, and I'm going to stop the recording.